What's up, everybody, and welcome to the iReach podcast. I'm your host, Paul Robinson, founder and CEO of ConstructReach, a national consultancy and initiative that aims to diversify the construction, design, and innovation industries and empower a younger generation. Every single week, we are here merging education, industry, and culture with a variety of featured guests that you do not want to miss. So let's go, iReach. All right, everybody, we are back here and I've got the team again. You know, I love having my team on. They help so much carry out the initiatives that we do collectively as our mission with ConstructReach. And so just want to say welcome to the team. You're going to hear them chime in, talk about some different things. But today we are talking about professional development, right? Like building the right team, what things to use, what tools to use, and how does that empower those who you have in your organization and maybe attract other people to your organization as well as you seek to build out that culture. So thanks everybody for joining us. And I'm going to get right into it because I want to make sure I give them enough time to speak on things. And so listen, as a team, we just went through some professional development. So we're letting you inside the walls of ConstructReach here. We just went through some professional development that I think is very important for us to talk through, not only from a leadership perspective, but also from the team members as well. And so we're going to be speaking about that. I'll speak about certain things from a leadership perspective. They'll speak about certain things as well. But one of the things that I really want to put emphasis on is this concept of leader-full organizations, right? And you may be wondering, okay, well, what is a leader-full organization? And so we go get into that a little later. But listen, I want to start off with Jennifer here. Jennifer, you know, we've talked internally about, you know, how was it going through this entire process with the assessments? And I want you to just kind of share like this journey, you know, that you went through as we began to incorporate some professional development and assessments or what have you. Talk to us a little bit about the value that you saw in that process.
Yeah, Paul. So I found it extremely valuable. One that we just really highlighted some of my strengths that maybe I wasn't aware of, or I wasn't having the opportunity to really show those strengths at the time because I wasn't aware, as well as it really helped me to be aware of how I can leverage those within my team and their dynamic personally for me. I'm always assessing myself. I love to learn. I love to grow. I love to measure things. You know this about me.
Yes.
Um, I'm a very structured person. So for me, it was very exciting to not only be thriving in an environment, but to learn how I could continue to thrive and how I could continue to really promote the culture where everyone could thrive based on what I learned from this process.
Oh, that is very good, Jen. That's very good. Yeah, we're going to get back to some of those things here because as you guys speak about certain things, it's bringing, you know, certain things in mind that I may want to touch on here. But just to kind of go around the room here. So Meredith, you got a chance to go through this as well. So as everybody else, tell me, what were some of your takeaways with going through the assessment process?
I learned a lot. Not only did I learn a lot about myself, I learned things that I wanted to change about myself. I learned things that I wasn't utilizing about myself, skills, characteristics, traits, assets. I learned a lot about the team, back to Jen's point about, you know, the team dynamic, the team culture, learning how to work together. My takeaways also were not only about self and how I work within myself, but then also kind of what ConstructReach, or Paul, you as a leader, like how you want to view your team. You know, you want to capitalize on our strengths, learn what those are, and then learn how we can utilize those not only for ourselves and internal development and growth, but then also for ConstructReach growth and development. You know, how can we come together, power forward, and you know, get the job done, you know, especially when there's such a small team. You know, we have to really work within large buckets and large boats. And so, you know, it's not really stretching the capacity, but it's utilizing those skill sets, those features that maybe you didn't know you had, or you use them somewhere else, and we're gonna, you know, transfer them to this. So I mean, I've got my packet sitting over there, and I kind of review it from time to time because I'm like, okay, girl, you got this, you know, or things you learned about yourself, and I'm like, aha. So I mean, my mind's still blown.
Oh, that is good. That is good. Let's see, Ebony, what about you? What were your takeaways going through this assessment process?
Well, it's interesting because I think what the value add, I think most importantly, I think everybody has kind of already touched on that, is really the what it allows you to do, and the information it gives you for yourself. But also throughout your career, you probably are used to assessments of some sort, right? Whether it be when you were in junior high, assessing what are you going to be when you grow up? What are some of those things that kind of bubble up that you have those innate gifts and abilities for? Or you kind of lean into science or lean into math. So I feel like, that assessment kind of culture is kind of interwoven into our educational experience. So then when you think about, okay, what's next for me as it relates to now that I learned kind of my baseline, right, going into my career and development, how do I strengthen that? So for me, it was very interesting because I could compare my notes, right? I could reflect back on the last, up to almost 15 years now of being in the workforce, of how I have changed or evolved based on where I am in my career and my own capacity, going from an individual contributor maybe to leading a team, a peer leader, now to being in leadership. Those different capacities change, which also requires different maybe skill sets, like Jen spoke about just a moment ago, that may kind of you pull on, right, or you lean more into, or maybe you didn't even know that you had. So I really enjoyed the reflection of, hey, did you know you were good at this? Did you know that you had the opportunity to continue to grow this? And guess what? Keep doing that. And so I think what it allows us to do, what Strength Finders, right? Maybe some of us have taken that, some of our listeners have taken that, and that philosophy is all about strengthening your strength, right? But I think also with our assessment and how you led us through it is kind of being aware of the people around you, right? And how do you leverage the strengths of those around you? So I'm really excited about what that's going to do for us, not only for our personal development, but for the company at large and our future growth.
Yeah, I mean, that is such a good response, Ebony. A lot of good insight, a lot of good takeaways. Let's see. So we'll keep moving here. Rebecca, what were some of your takeaways? What were some of your insights going through the assessment process?
Yes. Well, in general, I think the whole assessment was great. I always appreciate having the opportunity to be introspective about myself as a professional. I think one part that specifically stood out to me that I appreciated was that it shows you what kind of career you would succeed in the most. And, it validated, I'm a young professional coming out of college, that I'm in the right profession. I'm the marketing specialist, right? And it said that I would succeed in a creative role where I get to take creative liberties. So, it's great to feel as a young professional that you're in the right line of work. And that, also feels great that leadership wants to, know where you would work best in and how you communicate. So in learning that about myself, where my strengths and weaknesses lie, I loved it.
Yeah, no, that is good. That is good, especially when you mentioned the young perspective and getting started in your professional career, but also even going back before you get started when you're still in school. And so even for an intern, right? Like this is something that, Therese, you went through as well. Talk to us a little bit, man, from your perspective and what your takeaways were.
Yes. So with me being in school, of course, and also still working at the same time, going through this assessment has helped me. I know as everybody's already said it already, leveraging your skills, right? So I was able to take have the opportunity to leverage my skills, learn that, hey, I might be creative in this segment, or, hey, I might be a good communicator in this segment. So just with me, I'm able to play my role right. So I'm able to, okay, I'm creative. How do I leverage that in school, but also in the work environment too? So I'm able to go into certain spaces, know my strengths, but also work on my weaknesses at the same time.
I mean, that is such a wide array of responses, and rightfully so, because with the team here that we have, people are in different positions, people are in different seasons, people are in different points in their career journey. You have those who have been in their careers for a while now. And then, even when you look at an intern like Therese, who is on the verge of becoming a professional full-time, right? I know that can be a little daunting. As you're transitioning out of school and then you working full time, trust me, man, you can wait. But you see the different responses, right? And from a leader's perspective, that's essentially the value that happens with professional development along the way. and not discounting where somebody is to not want to implement that. Because for me, I think that it could be very useful. And I heard you talk a little bit, Therese, about just understanding how to lean into those gifts. And you are in an interesting perspective, well, not interesting perspective, but interesting position in life. Because a lot of times, we talk about as we go from stage to stage in life, we kind of use the S curve, right? And so when you are at the top of the S curve, that's kind of like you in your groove, you know who your friends are, you're comfortable at school, you're comfortable with, your classes that you take, you understand everything, you're comfortable in that environment. But now, as you transition out of college, and for all of our other young adults that are listening, going into their professional careers, you go right back down to the bottom of the S curve. So how can you begin to still be comfortable, still be confident in what you know, right? But also still remain humble enough to understand that there's room for growth and an opportunity for growth. And I think assessments really help you be sure about what you do well, being able to understand those gifts and what just comes natural for you, but then also being able to be open, right, to being further developed and understanding where you are in your professional journey. And then those who have been in their professional journey for quite some time, still seeing the value in that. And so we see across the board that there's value in having those assessments, having professional development along the way. Wouldn't y'all agree? Is that a unified yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. So listen, I heard one of you all say as well, how during this process, because we got a chance to learn some things about each other, right? Some things were just confirmation because we can see it in another person, but then some things were kind of new. And I think, Meredith, you mentioned that as well. Like, hey, I learned some new things about myself, some skills and some gifts that I'm not even using, right? That I can begin to tap into. But talk to me a little bit, team, and I'll go around the room as well here. Talk to me a little bit about how going through this process helps company culture and team collaborating, right? So I'll start with you, Ebony. Let's go around and start talking through how this process kind of helps as a team and internally.
First, number one, it's always good to know who you are, right? Number two, it's always great to know who you're working alongside. And number three, it's like, how do we best do that, right? So it would be a disservice to me to assume that Jennifer works exactly like I do, or Rebecca, or Meredith, or Therese, or even yourself. Yeah. Versus really leaning into understanding, hey, what is the best way to reach out to you? What's the best way for follow-up? Would you like an email? Would you like a correspondence via phone at the end of the week? Like, what kind of frequency would you like based on your style? And then if you need something from me, hey, this is what I would appreciate you. What I really enjoyed about the assessment and really getting the pulse about the people who work in your organization, or if you're a leader who work for you, is that you now have equipped tools, right, to be able to leverage and navigate, right? Maybe there's an obstacle, maybe there's a huge project to undertake, maybe people have to shift and be out of the office. And so based on different skill sets and different needs of us as individuals, now we're equipped of how do I navigate obstacles or challenges or conflicts or project management based on the people that I work with. And it also mitigates frustrations, right, out of our own expectation. So a lot of times we expect others to do as we do, right, because we know best. But the opposite of, and the truth of the matter is no one knows best, right? And so it really allows us to be very intentional, to have those working conversations and really be also intentional about how we respond to one another, right? Or like, hey, if you come across something of like, I didn't really understand that, or can you say it a different way? Because I don't really understand your language, right? It allows us to continue to be really sharpening our tools, right? And our abilities to be more collaborative and to rely on one another. So I think it's a whole game changer to allow an assessment to really be another tool and a resource for organizations really to tap into, to understand who they're leading and who's working where and maybe what they're missing. I think sometimes people don't even look at that. Like we kind of focus on, okay, what we're good at, what's some opportunities, but what are we missing? What are some of those attributes and acumens that maybe we're missing that's going to further enhance, right, where you are as an organization and even our team. So I think 100% a huge culture shift when you get a chance to lean in and start to be more intentional with the knowledge that you have, right? Less expectations and more of asking and more of collaborating.
Yeah, no, that is good. Yeah, you know, what I heard in there, you didn't say it, but what I heard is communication 101, know your audience, right? And I think going through this process, it helps you understand those who you are working with a lot better. And from there, you can act and you can engage in collaboration from a more informed position, right? So, Jen, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Paul, absolutely. For me, what I learned about the team and the dynamic really helps me when I'm partnering with people on projects, understand what strengths I need to bring to the team and what strengths they may possess as well. So maybe I need to allow them space to use those and shine in that area a little bit so that we have balance in that. Because sometimes we have a lot of attributes that are the same. And sometimes we don't need to bring all of them to the forefront, right? In one project, maybe we all shine in a different capacity. So I'm learning how to leverage that and create space for everyone to shine bright, which in results really brings the best product to the client, to the company, and it helps the team to continue to thrive and it promotes our culture.
Yeah, no, well said, well said. Meredith, what are your takeaways? How do you see the process that we went through, professional development just as a whole? How do you see that really enhancing team collaboration and company culture, quite frankly?
I think it goes back to kind of definitely the points that Ebony and Jen have already spoken to. But when you think about like specific pieces of it, I personally have heard Jen speak to, it was in line with unconscious bias, but it speaks to, you know, I may have a relationship with Ebony. So Paul gives me assignment and Paul says, you know, do X, Y, and Z. And maybe this assignment has some lenses that are not quite in my purview. And so because I have a relationship with Ebony and, you know, we eat lunch together every Tuesday, I immediately go to Ebony. But let's say that some of that lens or the outside of my purview lends to someone who's like, I don't know, a high school student, where maybe Therese would be a more optimal choice because he is our intern. And he's also a much younger person other than myself and or Jen. And so he would have a different perspective than maybe Ebony wouldn't have because we're closer in age. But it informs that. It informs that piece of it. It takes away that piece to say, okay, I know what skill sets Ebony does have. So in this lens or whatever lens pertains to her, I know where to go. In the lens that pertains to Therese, I know where to go. Or I know that Ebony can actually do this. She doesn't do it every day, but I know she can do this. Or she can definitely be on this call because she can add pieces to this that would help us in this direction or that direction. And it speaks to the sandbox analogy that I brought up earlier, and that now I know what's in my coworker's sandbox and I know how to work together. So I know that I need to go over to Rebecca's sandbox and build that castle her way because she has perspectives that I necessarily don't have. And I can lean into that. And so I think it really kind of helps us, you know, play in the same playground together collectively, cohesively, and effectively. And that's important, especially in our environment, you know, because we're all about, you know, communication and initiatives and collaborative work efforts and workforce development. So having that internal structure be solid is pertinent for how we do and what we do. So I just think it really, really, really played into the strengths of the team. It showed our weaknesses. It showed where, you know, I know what I need to work on, where I need to work on things, where I can go to kind of get maybe some mentorship or some examples or some assistance on things. It kind of also showed, well, I guess it kind of showed the gaps too, but it was really enlightening. And I think if you lean into that and you lean into the people and the strengths that they have, you can't really do anything but, you know, grow and develop. So.
Yeah, no, well said. You know, I want to make a point here as we're talking about professional development, and then one of the tools of professional development being the implementation of assessments. Now, there are a variety of assessments, right? You know, in terms of gifting, in terms of problem solving, critical thinking, emotional EQ, if you will. That's kind of the term that we use. But there are so many different right? Temperament assessments. And I want to make sure that, we put emphasis on this, especially from a leader's perspective. Yes, there is a ton of value in that, but I look at assessments as not a destination, but more so a compass, right? So they're not just absolute, because sometimes there are things that, come up in an assessment and you're like, you get kind of taken aback by that. Like, wait a minute, I don't agree with that. That's not me at all, and sometimes that could be true, right? But I look at it as not a destination. So not necessarily being absolute where you're locked in and then there's no more room for growth. There is no more room, right, for evolving. There's no more room for opportunities to be developed and things of that nature. But it's more so of that compass where you get a chance to have certain things confirmed, right? But also it brings this level of awareness that you're like, okay, maybe I can lean in this way. Maybe I can start to pivot and move this way. And so that's kind of how I look at it. What do you guys think about that? Is that kind of a good analogy, if you will, not necessarily a destination, but more so a compass? What are your thoughts, Rebecca?
I would say definitely a compass. As I just stated earlier, I'm a young professional up and coming into the workforce. So it's very important while I'm learning not only about my line of work, but while I'm learning about myself as a professional too, to know where my strengths and weaknesses lie. It's crucial to be introspective as I evolve as a professional in my career, because chances are at some point I'll be in a position of leadership as well. And I want to make sure that I'm growing into a good leader in my field also. The compass, especially in seeing things when you're like, is that really me? Really? And you're like, yeah, no, it is. Because you have to, it makes you double think about yourself. And it really is putting a mirror up to yourself. Exposing myself here. One of my things that I found out that I wasn't thrilled about was that I avoid like problem solving with others. I'd rather just do it myself. Right. And that's not what we want to do as a team. Going back to collaboration and culture, those collaboration and culture is highlighted by how a team can problem solve. So by knowing the way that I can problem solve better will help my culture and collaboration with my team as a whole. So instead of just being like, I'm gonna figure this out myself, I'll figure it out. I should come to Ebony, Meredith, you, Therese, Jennifer, and be like, can I have your help with this? What do you think about this? You know what I'm saying? Instead of just trying to do it all myself. Because like I said, it's important to stay humble. I'm young, I'm learning. And I think that's crucial for any young professional to remember in the career, is to ask for help and hold a mirror up to yourself every now and then and have that compass for sure.
Yeah. What? That's Michael Jackson, huh? Man in the mirror. Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
But no, that's cool. Very, very, very good insight. But you mentioned something about, future leadership and things of that nature, right? There's this term that I mentioned earlier when we kicked off this episode, and I said leader-full organizations, right? So leader-full organizations, quote unquote. And everybody doesn't have somebody underneath them, but you can begin to incorporate leader-full organizations. And what that essentially means is that, you know what? And that's why I said, I don't consider it to be too early to start incorporating professional development and assessment and things of that nature, because it's a good tool. As Therese mentioned, from his position of being an intern and from Rebecca's position of being young, in her professional career as well, and a newly graduate. So leader-full organizations essentially is saying, you know what, can I begin to take responsibility well for that which has been assigned to me? Because leaders, it's not necessarily about the title. Right? Leadership is not necessarily about a title. Leadership is about assuming the responsibility that comes along with that title. Right. And so it's making sure that we are developing the capacity for people to execute the responsibilities that have been assigned to them properly and efficiently and effectively. And you can begin to work on developing people to take on responsibilities well as soon as they start or before they even come on full time. And that leads itself into our internship curriculum and formalizing internship programs and new hire programs, investing in young talent now, because that's important, and positioning them to succeed regardless of where they are. Because if you're giving them those tools, to best carry out their roles and responsibilities at whatever level, guess what? As a leader, now you're able to act more efficiently. Now you're able to allow people to go and grow and work collaboratively, or be able to take on things from an anonymous position sometimes, especially when you think about this industry going from office to field, where sometimes, there's a little, if you will, kind of less eyes on you, depending on where you are and how you're operating. But if you can begin to develop those skill sets and invest in talent, right, at every stage of their career, now you are creating these leaderful organizations where it becomes much more efficient. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Yes. And that was a resounding yes.
Yes.
No, cool. I say I love y'all, man. That's why y'all back on, right? And y'all gonna come back on, right? No, cool. So listen, I know we've talked about this internally a couple of times, and this is something, this is brand new for us, right? We just went through this earlier this year. And so it's definitely fresh on our minds, and we've had conversations to come up offline about this. But Rebecca, you asked a very important question that I want to bring into the context of this episode. You want to speak to that a bit? Ask me now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll re-ask you. So as everyone can see, we obviously really appreciate these assessments, right? And so, I was just curious, as a leader and as a boss, like, what prompted you to look into these assessments and to implement them into our, career development, into our team?
Oh, man. Yeah. So very, very, very good question. For one, I saw the value of assessments early on, right? When I was in my career, I had the opportunity to go through assessments, but I also had the opportunity for the implementer of the assessments to debrief with me, right? And I just thought that was extremely valuable, because I hadn't gone through that experience before. And I was so young going through it. I know I'm still 25, but I was going through it, and it was just such a huge value add for me, right? And it never left my mind. And I felt like when I was that young and having those results reflected back to me and then talking through it, for me, I felt that was a huge turning point, and not necessarily turning point because I hadn't necessarily worked a lot before, but I thought that was a huge stepping stone for me, and a starting compass, if you will, for me to start going forth in these areas that I knew I was gifted in, but then hearing it confirmed and affirmed gave me the confidence to start leaning into these gifts that I had. Right. And so that just never left my mind. That was an experience that I'll never forget. And I saw the value in that. But then also just working a lot with other individuals, because within the industry of construction, you have a very unique position where you're working with people who are gifted differently all the time. And that could be with any position. But I say construction because I think it's magnified. Right. You have people that deal with certain packages, right? HVAC, plumbing, electrical, right? Welding, or what have you, refrigeration, or things of that nature. And you have project management that's trying to get all of these moving parts aligned, people who are specializing in certain parts. It's not the entire building, but it's a key functional part of the building. And when you understand how to lean into and allow people to operate in their area of gifting effectively, but how they work well with others, that interdependence, so that you can bring this entire building together, right? Seeing the value that each other bring so that you can accomplish this greater goal. There's a ton of value in that. And so for this industry, and even being consultants for this industry, I think it's good for us to operate like that, so that as we are consulting, all that is an outpour of who we are and how we operate internally as well, and the value that we're able to see. And so for me, I hope that you guys saw the value in it, and it sounds like you have. And so, that's music to my ears, when you guys are able to see the value of it, regardless of what stage of your careers you're in. So yeah, that was the thought behind it.
Paul, so in you explaining your history that you've been doing these kinds of assessments, having it reflected back to you, so this has kind of been your path, But I'm curious, was there anything this time that really kind of surprised you or that you learned about yourself that maybe you hadn't uncovered before? Just asking you to be a
Ooh,
little
ooh.
bit vulnerable here with us.
Oh man, no, you know what? I tell you, and that's a key word there is that vulnerability, leading in vulnerability. I'll tell you this, and I've shared this in passing before. It wasn't necessarily anything new that I learned about myself, but it was hearing this reoccurring theme that I've been hearing for a long time, and something that, you know, I would even mention, hey, I need help on, is working too much, taking on too much. You know, and for me, I always feel like it comes from a good place because I care so much, you know, and but when you care so much, you take on a lot of things, and sometimes you can hoard, you know, a lot of the assignments or things that others are gifted to execute and take on. And even though that's never the intent, right? I always want to empower others to lean into what they're good at and their strengths and to grow. Hence, that's why we went through the process. But that's a key point for me that just comes naturally is just, I'll do it. Oh, I'll do it. Oh, I take that on. I'll do it. And then my plate is full, right? Where I'm stretched really thin. And that lends itself into not having balance, you know, that lends itself and just to a wide array of other issues. And so that's always been there for me. That's something that I've tried to grow in, right? I mean, even the point that we have a team and we're continuing to grow and you guys have things to do, like that is me saying, you know what, P, you can't do it all. But very, very good question. Yeah.
And Paul, when you
Yes.
think about incorporating professional development as well as assessments, what are some of the things that leaders need to keep in mind as they're evaluating some of these tools to implement in their organizations for their workforce development?
Yeah. Now, very good question. I think from a leadership perspective, it communicates some things that you as a leader want to be communicated. And for one, it communicates intentionality and I see you. You know, especially like we are a small company. I know we do big things, y'all. But we're a small team. And it's a little bit easier for me, but this challenge is for every leader, is to make sure that people don't feel like they are unrecognized in their environment, in their organization. And what the implementation of assessments can do, or professional development and different tools that come underneath that category of professional development, is communicate that I see you, I want you to grow, I want you to thrive, you're important to this organization. And I am leaning in to provide the resources and the tools that you need to grow, right? I think that's something that as a leader, you want your team to know about you, especially if you care about them growing. You want to make sure they know about that. And so that could be a tool, and that allows you to communicate that, you know, in a personal way without necessarily being in front of them as well, right? Because you think about these, I mean, some companies are so large, they can't be in front of every single person, let them know that they matter, but they can begin to implement things company-wide that communicates you matter. So yeah, I mean, I know we can talk about this stuff all day. Of course, that's why I said y'all got to come on again, because we do a lot of things here internally that I think would be good for us to just talk through. I mean, that's who we are. You know, I know organizations may find themselves in the same place. And so we just like to, you know, turn the thing inside out, you know, and allow for others to see what we're going through. But hopefully this was a value add to our audience here. I want to thank my team for being on. We would not be here collectively as a group without the individual gifts that you all bring to the team. And so thank you for just leading in excellency, continuing to grow, continuing to strive, reflecting back to me how I can be a better leader, but also encouraging me and letting me know some of the things that I'm doing well, right? So thank you guys for joining us today. We will be back, of course, next week. Continue to stay locked in to the iReach podcast. We out. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning into our show. Remember, like, share, subscribe to the podcast, and join the movement as we reach to build a better future that we can all be proud of.